This video relates to key thinker number 5 for socialism, paper 3, and it's Anthony Giddens. Anthony Giddens would not thank you for calling him a politician, although today he is Baron Giddens, a life peer, member of the House of Lords, representing the Labour Party. But he would not want to be referred to as a politician by any means, but a sociologist. He was born in 1938 and as a young man was able to benefit from the post-war welfare state of the Labour government, which was then continued by successive governments. He's most known for third way politics, and that is a centrist position that was adopted by New Labour in the 1990s, which tried to move on from the old left-wing versus right-wing debate in British politics. Essentially, his key work is his 1994 text, Beyond Left and Right. Third way politics essentially is trying to take centre-right economics and combine that with centre-left social policy. And we'll talk in a little bit of detail later on of how that exactly works. Anthony Giddens went to a grammar school, the type of school that Anthony Crossland wanted to abolish, but Giddens had been and gone by the time the grammar school system was changed. He was the first in his family to go to university, and he went to Hull before he later undertook a master's degree at LSE, which was founded by Beatrice Webb, and then received a PhD from Cambridge University. And in fact, the modern day department with which politics is taught at Cambridge University was originally founded by Giddens himself. As I said, he's a life peer in the House of Lords for the Labour Party, and for many socialists, the House of Lords represents yet again the dominance of an aristocracy, of an age gone by, the dominance of one privileged group of individuals ahead of wider society. But on the modern Labour Party right, there tends to be more of a respect for institutions like the House of Lords. You may have seen Sir Keir Starmer in his early leadership days talking about how Labour would abolish the House of Lords, and he seems, Sir Keir Starmer, to have reined back on that pledge, but we will see what happens in the future with that one. What's important with Anthony Giddens is, although he's not in Tony Blair's cabinet, he is the key influence behind the economic policy of New Labour in the 1990s. So our final three key thinkers, Webb, Crossland and Giddens, are all in their own ways intrinsically linked in the history of the British Labour Party. So let's move on and look at how Giddens views human nature, society, state and economy. So the first thing to say about Giddens is that he's a revisionist socialist. And any revisionist, historian, whatever it may be, you're trying to retell a story that's already been told. And so for Giddens, he looks at Marx's idea that our human nature is damaged by capitalism. He revises that. Now, that's not to say that he completely rejects it in all ways, but he revises that view. And what that means is that for Anthony Giddens, yes, we are naturally inclined to fairness. So there is a similarity there to key thinker number 4, Anthony Crossland. But our human nature has changed with time. And again, that there's a similarity to Marx there, because Marx argued our human nature was malleable. So there is this idea that our human nature has changed over time. And although we are still inclined towards fairness, human beings are individually ambitious, which sounds a little bit like liberalism. And actually what you're going to see with Giddens and with the New Labour project is there's lots of elements of certainly modern liberalism that have been adopted. So for Anthony Giddens, looking at this situation, he thinks that, yes, our human nature is malleable, yes, it can change over time, and the current state of our human nature in a modern capitalist economy is that we are inclined to fairness, but we do have our own individual ambitions. Giddens' view of the state is quite similar to Crossland's. Now, if you remember that Crossland was arguing that the state could actively make better the lives of the least well off. And that's what Giddens is arguing for. Actually, for Giddens, he's happy with the existing liberal state that protects the rights of the individual. And those existing state structures can be improved. They can redistribute wealth, but also decentralise power and put power in the hands of regions and communities. And the idea behind that is that local situations, local issues are best solved at local level. Now, that's a similar sort of argument to the one being made by T.H. Green, one of our liberal key thinkers for AQA. But what Giddens was arguing was that power needed to be not just redistributed, but decentralised, and more power given at regional and local level to allow for local issues to be dealt with. And that goes some, but not all the way, to explaining the Labour Party's support for devolution after its election in 1997. So we'll move on now to talk about Giddens and society. For Giddens, society can continue to be improved, and that can be done within the existing state structures. He, like Crossland, rejects the idea of two social classes of a proletariat and a bourgeoisie, and actually in the modern sense, to talk of the working class in the late 20th, early 21st century. That phrase means something far different to what it did in the 1950s. In the 1950s, where you lived and the job you had, was a very clear definition of what your social class was. But by the late 20th century, that is certainly not the case. You know, if you grew up in Bolton in the 1940s, or you started playing football in the 1940s, you were working class. In fact, you know, football was the hobby on top of the job. You know, Bolton's most famous ever football player, Sir Nat Lofthouse, not officially knighted outside of the borders of Bolton. You know, those working class heroes, Lofthouse, Tom Finney at Preston, these are people who, for Lofthouse, you know, he worked in mines and played football as a hobby on a Saturday. And when he retired, that career hadn't set him up financially for life. Now, if you're a young footballer that comes from Bolton and becomes a full-time footballer, let's use the example of Jack Harrison, who plays for Leeds United. He's going to earn, you know, more money in a week than most people might earn in 6 months or even a year. And so the economy has changed, the world has changed, and identifying social classes is nowhere near as easy as it once was. You cannot simply identify somebody's social class based on where they live, or the education level they got, or the school they went to, or the job they have. It really isn't as simple. Modern society has changed. And for Giddens, we have undergone embourgeoisement. There are no longer working class values and middle class values. All of society holds these similar aspirational middle class values. Now, for Giddens, that wasn't a false consciousness, as a revolutionary socialist would call it. It isn't something that needs to be attacked and defeated. For Giddens, actually, this was just something that needed to be accepted and embraced, and it would be unwise for a state to deny that this change had happened. Okay, let's talk now about the economy. And Peter Mandelson has been often quoted, and actually in later interviews in later life, Peter Mandelson has said that he has been taken somewhat out of context. But Peter Mandelson, now Lord Mandelson, was another key figure in the New Labour movement, and basically said, we don't care if you're filthy rich as long as you pay your taxes. And that seemed to embody the New Labour economic approach, which was advocated by Anthony Giddens. And that approach is embrace the free market, because when the capitalist economy is working well, then it's good news for the government. Because individuals and corporations who do well in an economy that's thriving, pay their taxes, and those taxes go into the public coffers, and the government can increase public spending. And so that is how the New Labour revisionist approach to socialism worked. Embrace the free market, make it work for as many people as possible, because when the economy when the capitalist economy performs well, the tax yield, the amount of money coming in from various taxes, goes up. So when that taxation level goes up, that is when public spending can increase. And that's what we see the Labour Party do. The Labour Party, when it was elected, had priorities to improve healthcare funding and funding for education. Labour wanted to limit class sizes, set up Sure Start centres for families at local level. And that was the economic approach in a nutshell, which is embrace the capitalist economy, embrace neoliberalism. Don't advocate for nationalisation of the economy. Allow for a privatised economy. Try and encourage it to perform as well as it can and in the interests of as many people as possible, which will increase the amount of tax money that the government gets, which means that the government can increase its own public spending. And just think about how different that is from key thinker number one, Karl Marx. You know, capitalism was all that was wrong with the economy, with the state, with society, with our human nature. If something was wrong, the ultimate evil, the ultimate cause was capitalism. Fast forward now 150 years or so, and Anthony Giddens is saying that a free market economy should be embraced and made to work for as many people as possible because it will allow for greater government spending. That sounds very much to me like the work of John Rawls and modern liberalism. So this economic approach that Giddens is projecting, is advocating, is very similar to those modern liberals who are arguing for equality of opportunity too.